I was still at my desk when my phone buzzed. It was nearly 5:30 p.m., the sun setting through the tall windows of my office. My daughter Emily should have been home from her after-school art class by now. She always texted me before she left, usually with a photo of whatever painting she had finished. But tonight nothing. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, all I heard was the voice of a stranger, trembling. "Are you Jessica Carter, Emily's mother?" My stomach dropped. "Yes." "Where's my daughter?" "There's been an accident. She's at St. Anne's Hospital. You need to come immediately." I don't remember dropping the pen in my hand or knocking over the files on my desk. I only remember the sound of my own pulse in my ears as I grabbed my bag and ran. By the time I reached the parking garage, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys. The 20-minute drive to St. Anne's was a blur of red lights and near collisions. I don't even know how I got there without crashing myself. When I pushed through the sliding doors of the emergency ward, I spotted my sister Claire pacing in the waiting area, tears streaking her face. "They hit her, Jess. Some idiot in a sports car. Emily was crossing at the light and he just..." Claire broke off, covering her mouth. My knees nearly gave way. "Is she alive?" "She's alive," Claire said quickly. "She's in surgery. Broken arm, cracked ribs, a concussion, but she'll make it." For a second, relief flooded me enough to let me breathe. Then the anger came. Consuming. "Who was driving?" Claire hesitated. "Witnesses said it was a black Maserati. They got the license plate." She lowered her voice. "Jess, it belongs to Kyle Morrison, the CEO's son." Froze. Kyle Morrison, 22 years old, known around town for his flashy cars, wild parties, and endless scandals that always disappeared within days. And of course his father, Richard Morrison, the untouchable billionaire who ran Morrison Global. The man who donated millions to campaigns, had judges on speed dial, and controlled half the city like a puppet master. I had crossed paths with Richard Morrison once before at a fundraiser. He was charming on the surface, but the kind of charm that coated venom. And now his son had nearly killed my daughter. A detective in a worn gray suit appeared, introducing himself as Detective Harris. His face told me everything before his words did. "Mrs. Carter, I wanted you to hear this from me." We traced the car. Witnesses saw Kyle Morrison get out and run, but... He hesitated. "But what?" His father's already brought in a team of lawyers. They're claiming Kyle wasn't driving, that it was a case of mistaken identity. Without physical evidence, it's going to be difficult. I felt the blood drain from my face. Difficult. My daughter is lying broken in surgery and they're talking about difficult. "Detective," I said slowly, carefully. "Are you telling me the Morrison family is trying to erase this?" He gave me a tired look. "I'm saying Richard Morrison has influence. He's done this before. Cases vanish, charges dropped, witnesses change their stories." For a moment the room spun. I gripped the edge of a chair, forcing myself not to collapse. In my career I had learned how to keep control of my emotions, how to stay composed even when everything inside me was burning. But this was my child. I swallowed hard. "Thank you for being honest with me, Detective." He nodded, apologetic, then walked away. I sat down in the cold hospital chair, staring at the wall. The rage inside me wasn't wild anymore. It was cold, sharp, precise. I had buried a part of myself years ago, choosing a quieter life for Emily's sake. I'd built a career as a corporate consultant, left behind the world I once knew, the world where I had learned how to fight battles most people never saw. But now those instincts stirred again, whispering to me. When the surgeon finally came out and said Emily would pull through, I thanked him, but my mind was already moving elsewhere. Not on healing but on retribution. I stepped into the corridor, dialed a number I hadn't used in years. When the voice answered, gravelly and cautious, I said, "It's Jessica Carter. I need a favor." There was silence, then a low chuckle. "Jessica, I thought you'd gone soft." "Not anymore," I said. "I want everything you can dig up on Richard Morrison." His business, his contacts, his son. I want leverage. Every dirty secret. Careful, the voice replied. That man owns half the court system. I looked back toward the room where my daughter lay fighting for her future. My voice hardened. Then he's about to learn what it feels like to be powerless. That night, as the monitors beeped softly beside Emily's bed, I made myself a silent promise. Richard Morrison thought money could erase consequences. He thought his son was untouchable, but he had just picked a fight with the wrong mother. And in the morning, he would realize who I really was. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside Emily's bed, listening to the steady beep of the monitors, memorizing the rise and fall of her chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw headlights, heard the screech of tires, imagined her small body thrown to the pavement. By morning, the rage inside me had sharpened into something colder. I had spent my career navigating boardrooms full of arrogant executives who believed money insulated them from consequence. But Richard Morrison had crossed a line. He wasn't going to bury this under legal paperwork. Not this time. Not with me. At noon, after Emily was resting comfortably and Claire promised to stay with her, I drove downtown. Morrison Global's headquarters loomed over the city like a glass fortress. 40 stories of steel, glass, and arrogance. The lobby smelled of polished marble and power. The receptionist smiled politely until I said, "I'm here to see Richard Morrison." "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Tell him it's about his son Kyle," I said, my voice steady. "And my daughter Emily. He'll want to see me." Something flickered in her eyes. She picked up the phone, murmured a few words, then nodded reluctantly. "Mr. Morrison will see you. Top floor." The elevator ride was silent, but my thoughts were deafening. This wasn't about negotiation. This was about setting terms. When the doors opened, I stepped into an office so large it could have been a showroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, and at the center of it all, behind a sleek mahogany desk, sat Richard Morrison. He didn't stand. He didn't even offer a handshake. He simply leaned back in his leather chair, a glass of scotch in his hand, studying me like I was a minor inconvenience. "Mrs. Carter," he said smoothly, "I'm sorry for the unfortunate situation with your daughter." "Unfortunate situation." My voice was ice. "Your son ran her down in the street and fled." He waved a dismissive hand. "Alleged. And even if Kyle was involved, he's young. Boys make mistakes. Accidents happen." I stepped closer, refusing to be intimidated by his practiced charm. This wasn't an accident. This was negligence. Criminal negligence. His eyes hardened. "Mrs. Carter, I understand you're emotional. But let's be realistic. Even if charges were filed, which they won't, my son is untouchable. I own the city's courts. Judges, prosecutors, politicians, they all answer when I call." There it was. The arrogance, the sneer beneath the tailored suit. He believed it. He really believed his power made him immune. I leaned over his desk until I was close enough to see the faint lines of age at the corners of his eyes. "You have no idea who you're talking to." He smirked. "I know exactly who I'm talking to. A mother. Consultant. A woman who doesn't understand how this game is played. Take the insurance settlement my lawyers will offer and move on with your life." Check my watch. "You have 10 minutes to call the police and turn Kyle in. Full confession. No deals. No excuses." For a heartbeat. He stared at me in disbelief. Then he laughed, a deep, mocking laugh that echoed against the glass walls. "Or what?" he taunted. "You'll sue me. Post angry messages online. I've crushed men twice your size for half as much insolence. You think you can threaten me?" I straightened, my expression calm. 9 minutes, 40 seconds. His laughter grew louder. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Security." But before his guards arrived, his office door burst open. A man in a tailored suit rushed in, his face pale. "Morrison's lawyer." "Richard," the man said, his voice low and urgent. "We have a problem." Morrison scowled. "Not now." "Yes, now," the lawyer snapped, sweat beading at his temples. He held up a tablet with trembling hands. "The judge you own. He just announced his sudden retirement this morning, effective immediately. And Detective Harris filed for a new warrant, signed by a judge we don't control." Morrison's smirk faltered. "That's impossible." The lawyer's voice dropped to a whisper. "They have traffic camera footage. Private security feed. Clear as day. Kyle behind the wheel. They're coming for him." The room fell silent except for the hum of the city outside. Morrison's arrogance wavered, replaced by the first glimmer of fear. I looked at my watch again. 6 minutes left. The lawyer swallowed hard, then turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, please. We'll follow your terms. Kyle will turn himself in. Full cooperation. Just stop this before it goes further." I met Morrison's eyes. "You thought money made you untouchable. You thought power meant protection. But you forgot one thing. Real power doesn't come from fear. It comes from consequences." As I walked out of that office, leaving Richard Morrison in stunned silence, I felt something I hadn't felt since the accident. Control. For the first time, the fight wasn't just mine. The dominoes had already started to fall, and there was no stopping them now. Kyle Morrison's arrest made headlines before nightfall. Cameras swarmed the police station as Richard's carefully constructed empire cracked for the first time. His son, disheveled and pale, was led inside in handcuffs. The Morrison name, once untouchable, was now dripping across every news ticker in the country. But Richard wasn't done. He launched his counterattack immediately. Press releases calling Emily's injuries tragic but exaggerated. His lawyers petitioning for dismissal. His PR machine spinning stories about Kyle being a victim of mistaken identity. The arrogance hadn't died. It had only shifted strategy. What Richard didn't know was that I had prepared for this. My old contact, the gravelly voice on the phone, delivered what I needed in neat, damning folders. Offshore accounts, backdoor deals, politicians on his payroll. Evidence that painted Morrison Global not as a beacon of commerce, but as a kingdom of rot. I didn't release it all at once. I was surgical. A leaked contract here, a whistleblower testimony there. Each revelation timed perfectly before every court date, every press conference. The public opinion shifted like a tide. Richard Morrison wasn't just defending his son anymore. He was defending his empire and losing ground fast. In the courtroom, I sat directly behind the prosecution's table. Kyle avoided my gaze every time. His once cocky grin replaced by the hollow stare of a boy who had never faced a real consequence in his life. Emily, her arm in a cast, insisted on attending one hearing. When she walked in, fragile but unbroken, the room shifted. The jury saw her. The cameras saw her. And for the first time, the Morrison defense faltered. Detective Harris gave me a small nod across the aisle. He knew as well as I did. This wasn't just justice, it was history. Richard tried one last move. A private offer slipped to me through his lawyers. Enough money to vanish for a lifetime. "Think of your daughter's future," the note read. I burned the letter. When the verdict came, it wasn't the maximum sentence. I knew it never would be. But Kyle Morrison was declared guilty. Prison time. No deals. No sealed records. His name would forever be tied to what he had done. And for Richard, the true punishment wasn't the sentence. It was the spectacle of defeat. The illusion of control, shattered in front of the world he once ruled. Weeks later, Emily was home, slowly healing. Her laughter returned in fragments, like sunlight through clouds. Some nights she still woke from nightmares, but she always found me there, holding her hand until the fear faded. One evening as I tucked her into bed, she asked softly, "Mom, is the bad man gone?" I kissed her forehead. "He's gone, sweetheart. And he's never coming back." When I stepped outside into the quiet night, I looked up at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Richard Morrison sat in his penthouse, stripped of the one thing he valued most, untouchable power. He would live with the knowledge that it was me, the woman he dismissed as just another mother, who dismantled his empire piece by piece. Revenge hadn't brought me peace. But it had brought something else: balance, consequences. And as I stood beneath the stars, listening to the faint sound of my daughter's breathing through the open window, I knew one truth would remain for the rest of my life. They had tried to erase my child. Instead, I had erased their illusion of control. And I would do it again without hesitation.